Welcome back to Echo Ridge and another episode here in our Max Colonization series. Now I know I often say that we have a lot to do today, but it's especially true today. In fact, I think this one episode is going to end up being 2 videos. I don't know where I'm going to cut it yet, but you'll understand here in a minute. It starts off with our rocketry program. First, we need to provide some fuel. In the case of steam, we're just going to grab it right from our sauna. Granted, we're not renewing any of the steam in here, but we can just throw some water in there whenever we need, which that's only a temporary solution because we're not going to be on steam engines for long. And we have 2 early objectives with our space mission. The first is exploration, and the second is data banks. The issue is we don't have anything to feed our duplicants here. Even with the steam engine only having a range of 10, meaning that our rocket can go out 5 tiles and come back 5 tiles, depending on the piloting skill of the duplicant that is flying our exploration rocket, that could take 15 to 20 cycles. Our research rocket, unless we land it pretty consistently, is intended to be up in space for 40 or 50 cycles. Well, Echo, why don't you just put a refrigerator up there and use standard food? Well, the problem is, when you put a refrigerator inside of a rocket, you don't know what the freshness of the food that the duplicants are going to be loaded into it. For instance, it could be 90% fresh barbecue, or it could be the 38% stale veggie poppers. In the case of the veggie poppers, their freshness diminishes by 3% per cycle inside of a refrigerator, which means in less than 13 cycles, these veggie poppers return to polluted dirt and could leave a dupe stranded out in space without any good source of food. So that gives you 4 options. The first being, when the duplicants drop off food, manually sorting the food based on freshness, sending the more stale food away, and only keeping fresh food. Keep in mind that is a very micro-intensive process. The second is using the spice grinder. If we add some freshener spice to any of the foods that we're already cooking, they will become shelf-stable forever inside of a refrigerator. The disadvantages of this are A, you have to run a refrigerator inside your rocket, which does take a little bit of power, and B, you need mealwood seeds and salt. Now I have managed to find a mealwood seed out of the pod, so we could start with a mealwood farm and get plenty of seeds to be able to run our space food program. The issue then becomes the salt. As many of you know, we're kind of hurting on salt in the colony. Yes, we are making new salt from the desalinator. In fact, right now it has about 500 kilos in it, but we only get that once the desalinator needs to be cleaned out. And when we do get that, well, we bring most of that over to this conveyor loader to run the rusty deoxidizer, which requires 250 grams of salt per second. And we're doing that to turn all the rust into iron ore. That leaves us with option number 3 and option number 4, which are pemmican and berry sludge. Now, berry sludge is the clear favorite for the simple reason it is a good quality +3, which gives the duplicant a +8 morale when they're eating, and each batch is worth 4,000 calories. Whereas the pemmican is a standard quality +2 and only comes out at 2,600 calories per batch. Unfortunately, while we do have megafron grain on this colony, we don't have bristleberries or pike apples. So despite its significant disadvantage to the berry sludge, pemmican is our answer. We have meat and we have tallow. The reason why we have tallow is because we've managed to find a spigot seal quite a long time ago, I believe, from the printing pod. And when the spigot seal expires, it leaves 50 kilos worth of tallow. But we also have another solution for tallow in the form of the biodiesel. Whenever you freeze biodiesel, it turns into tallow. So not only do we have all the ingredients for the pemmican, we also have a couple of options. Do we go biodiesel or spigot seals? You may think the advantage spigot seals the fact that they give us ethanol, but to tell you the truth, I don't know what I would do with the ethanol. Its biggest use case is probably throwing it into a petroleum generator and burning it for power. But we have more power than we know what to do with as is on this colony, so So I think the simpler solution is just going to be freezing our biodiesel, possibly utilizing our B setup to do that. More on that here in a little bit. So that's all the stuff we have to do in our primary planetoid. We also have a bunch of stuff we need to do on Regolith. Remember, we need a permanent solution for oxygen and food. We're eventually going to run out of polluted dirt, and there isn't another way to make polluted dirt other than well, letting food expire around here, or sending a bunch of polluted water through a water sieve. But I don't have a bunch of sand either. What we do have is a liquid sulfur geyser. If we cool the liquid sulfur, we can feed the solid sulfur to Sweetles. The Sweetles not only will give us more meat for that pemmican, will also give us sucrose. We could take that sucrose, feed it to grubs, who will once again give us more meat, but additionally give us mud. We could then take that mud, keep throwing it through the sludge press to give us more dirt and more water. And that water we could use inside of our electrolyzers, which would have the advantage of not only providing oxygen for this colony, but also a little bit of extra hydrogen, which we could combine with this hydrogen vent to produce more power for this colony. Because another thing we have to do on this colony is start tapping the oil reservoirs. The oil reservoirs are going to be important because eventually we're going to need some petroleum. And that petroleum is going to be the mid to early late game solution for our rocket engines. Because we can't stay on steam engines for long. Because once again, they only have a range of 10, which doesn't get us too far out into the star map. So yes, we have plenty to do. And that's before any of the random problems pop up. For instance, some of you noticed a bunch of oxygen inside of our Dartle and Rex Ranch. How did it happen, considering we only have one gas vent going into this ranch? With one source of the chlorine being a sealed up tight chlorine gas vent, well, you probably guessed it. It's the wonderful powerless filter. What most likely happened is the oxygen in this line backed up. And even though I did put precautions into place, the SPOM only provides oxygen when there is no oxygen in this line still ended up getting backed up. And when it does, one of the failings of a powerless filter is the fact that, yes, all the oxygen is meant to go this way. Well, if this way is full, it'll bypass and go the way the chlorine goes, which is one of the huge failings with the powerless filter setups that a standard gas filter would not allow to happen. Because when its filtered gas gets backed up, well, the gas filter just stops. It never allows it out through the other side. Now, to fix this problem, I did put a failsafe. If this line gets backed up again, I have yet another overflow that goes into a high-pressure gas vent. And to tell you the truth, this is not a 100% failsafe, because if this environment around here ever exceeds 20 kilos worth of oxygen pressure, well, once again, this vent will stop, and all of that excess oxygen will bypass and head back into the ranch. I don't think that's going to happen, though. The idea that our outside environment is at 20 kilos of oxygen is a little far-fetched. I still wanted to mention it to you, though, because even with this stopgap, a standard gas filter is just the better solution. To fix my poor Rex and Dartle Ranch, I've put in a gas pump and a good filter that is filtering out all the oxygen and the chlorine. It's sending the chlorine back in, and to tell you the truth, this system could be better served if I had the gas pump a little higher, but I don't want to deconstruct anything up here, and that's what it would take because, well, there is no more room for a 2x2 gas pump. So I'm just going to let this run for quite some time until all of that oxygen goes away. So we're going to start today over here on Recalin, and we do have quite a bit to accomplish, so I thought it would be smart to print out our frozen dupe. We ended up with the Nails, who already comes out of the gate with a huge bonus considering they get the maximum aptitude bonus, but looks like they have an interest in farming, which is great for us, because I'm going to need a rancher to take care of all the Sweetles and the grubs. If you remember when we installed this whole system, we did already put in 2 mess tables and 2 camping cots, so Nails already has a place to eat and sleep. We do need to increase the amount of bog buckets to make sure that Nails has something to eat. We still have a huge surplus of food, so I'm only planting 2 now, despite the fact that each duplicant does require 4. Ooh, I almost forgot. We need to name the Nails. Welcome to duplicant number 24 of the series and number 2 on this planetoid, Mustang Cody. While I'm at it with dupe names, the comments were very helpful in the fact that I had forgotten to add our sleeping name precaution to Bob ate my Bob with the 3 Z's. That way when we're in here in the skills, I don't mistakenly give skills to any of our sleeping dupes. Speaking of which, Bendling's already up to an athletics of 22. They can probably come out of the gym now. We'll just go ahead and remove those permissions. Looks like Bendling is going to be a tidying builder. We'll start with the improved construction and the improved strength, and then head directly into suit sustainability for the exosuit bonus. Oh yeah, we'll go right into exosuit training, and the future skills will end up going into plumbing and pyrotechnics. As far as priorities, we'll just single up arrow, supplying, storing, operating, and tidying. While I am here, it's time to do a brief skills review. It looks like Noosh is ready for some exosuit training. Plus, they can get better at farming and ranching. That only brings them up to an 18 morale requirement, and right now they have a 42. We also have Brett Thomas, who is also low on the morale requirement. That's how I tell when a duplicant needs new skills, is because the morale requirement's not high enough. For instance, the next time I come back here and I look at all the duplicants, all I have to do is scan down. We're not looking at the zeros because those are sleeping dupes, but if they have a 10 or under, it means they have stuff they need to do over here. On our secondary planetoid, you'll notice that we're getting between 21 and 24 morale. I'm instantly going to take Mustang Cody, put them into critter ranching. They do prefer their farming, but critter ranching is where they're going to do their meat and potatoes, and maybe some improved carry. Now, eventually I am going to need a suit system here because, well, we're going to have to work in the oil biome to get our petroleum. The big question on my mind right now is, how much water do I need? Remember, we're going to be using an electrolyzer to supply oxygen for at least 2 duplicants. And then I'm going to need water, 1 kilo per second, for the oil wells to get enough crude oil to turn into petroleum for our rockets. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, we're also going to need an oil refinery, which is going to end up giving us natural gas. And when we throw that into a natural gas generator, we'll end up producing a little bit of polluted water. But I don't plan on using the oil refinery to get petroleum. In fact, I plan on using a petroleum boiler. Except the petroleum boiler that I am going to be using isn't one I've ever seen before. So make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay tuned for more videos like this. Look, it's rare that I do a shameless plug. Just go ahead and click all the buttons. And you might want to buckle up because this one's going to get a little convoluted. To start off figuring out how much water we're actually going to need, which will then in turn tell us how many Sweetles and grubs we need, let's look at the electrolyzer. We know that an electrolyzer can produce enough oxygen for 8.88 duplicants. We also know that the electrolyzer requires 1 kilo worth of water to produce the 8.88 duplicants worth of oxygen. So we sort of got a couple of ratios that are going to give us a clue on how much water we need. First thing we do is look at our requirement. We want 200 grams worth of oxygen per second. I'm going to err on the positive side and say 225 grams per second. And then I'm going to divide that by the 888 grams. That is the max potential of the electrolyzer. And that gives me just over 25%, which means I only need 25% of the water requirement, i.e. 250 grams of water per second. All right, we've got one figure down. The next is a little bit more difficult to predict because we don't know how much petroleum we're going to end up needing, which means we don't know how much oil we'll end up needing. But I'm just going to go ahead and assume that one oil well will be enough petroleum for our rocketry missions. It may end up being bigger in the future. If so, we can supplement that later with another water source. But we have a 250 grams per second requirement for our electrolyzer and then 1,000 grams per second for our oil well for a total of 1,250 grams. Well, when we multiply the 1,250 grams times 600 seconds in a cycle, I need 750 kilos worth of water per cycle. That's a lot, especially when you consider that each grub only gives us 30 kilos worth of mud per cycle, which only gives us 90 kilos worth of water on the other side. But for funsies, let's do the math. It takes 5 grubs, all producing 30 kilos worth of mud, just to be able to give us the 150 kilos worth of mud required to give us 90 kilos worth of water. Well, 750 kilos divided by 90 kilos is 8.33, which means I need 8.33 batches of 150 kilos worth of mud. And we know it takes 5 grubs each to give us that much mud. So the 8.333 times 5 gives us 41.666, repeating of course, grubs, in order to get 750 kilos worth of water per cycle. To make matters worse, every single grub needs 30 kilos worth of sucrose, and each Sweetle can only give us 10 kilos. which means it would take 3 times, we're going to round up and say 42 grubs. In other words, we need 126 Sweetles to give us that much sucrose. And then on top of that, if I need 126 Sweetles, and each one of them is eating 20 kilos worth of sulfur, that means I need a little bit over 2.5 tons worth of sulfur per cycle. And I know our sulfur is going to give us a lot. And even if we thought the liquid sulfur geyser was erupting at 100% of the time, which we already know it's not, it's only erupting 416 seconds out of every 744, plus you have the active and dormancy period, it still wouldn't give you enough sulfur. Even if we had 2 sulfur geysers on this planetoid, which we may, it still wouldn't be enough sulfur. So yeah, long story short, it's just not going to work without assistance. I could ranch some Sweetles and grubs to provide the oxygen portion, but to run a petroleum program, I'm going to need water from the other planetoid. But regardless of the fact that we're going to bring water over for the petroleum, I still would like to supplement that water source because if you remember at the beginning of this series, I said we're going to try to make each colony as self-sufficient as possible. Now, in some cases, the realm of possibility is just based on what you want to do with the planetoid. So I'm still going to run the Sweetles and grubs to get mud to provide water to be able to feed an electrolyzer, which makes the numbers a lot more reasonable. Remember our 250 gram requirement of water for the electrolyzer to support a little over 2 duplicants worth of oxygen. So we'll need 250 grams worth of water per second times 600 seconds is only 150 kilos. 150 kilos worth of water is less than 2 batches worth of mud. In fact, it's 1.67 batches, and you get that by taking 150 and divide it by 90, and then I can round up, say 1.7 batches times 150 kilos worth of mud is 255 kilos, and then we just divide the 255 by the 30, so I know I need to run 8.5 grubs. 8.5 grubs, each requiring 30 kilos worth of sucrose, is 255 kilos of sucrose, which means I need to run 26 Sweetles. Not too bad. And because I'm going to forget that, and while oxygen not included does not have a notepad, you can still write things in space. I know I need 26 Sweetles and 9 grubs. So step 1 is going to be taming this liquid sulfur geyser. It is active right now, which is going to make this even more painful. But I'm also going to need some steel for a thermo aquatuner. I'm going to need power from this hydrogen vent. Oh boy. So let me send over some steel. I will start off by saying, hey, send over 2 tons of steel. There's that. We'll send that over. I'm also going to need some iridium for the gas pump. Let's just say 500 kilos worth of iridium. And then finally, I'm going to need a little bit of plastic. 500 kilos will be plenty. Now, this liquid sulfur geyser gets really hot at 165 degrees. I'd rather wait for this thing to be dormant, but ONI's going to do ONI things and wait until I've got it tamed before it'll go dormant. Now that I'm looking at it, I think I'm going to need a little bit more iron too. We only have 800 kilos and I got to build the steam turbine. So what I'm going to try to do is a little bit of a cheeky soft lock. I'm going to put a little bit of liquid here and then put a tile here. So that way I can get in here, vacuum the whole thing out. So even if the liquid sulfur geyser does erupt, it'll just be a pool of liquid sulfur. Now granted, the dupes won't love being in there, but they'll be okay. And while Callie is doing this, it's going to be very important, because I only have water on this planetoid that I can create this soft lock with, that there's no atmosphere in here. So we're also going to quickly set up a little bit of a gas pump. We did send over a little bit of plastic so we can use the high pressure gas vent. Then we just need to connect it with our main power line. Oh good, we're having an eruption now before we uncork it. So I know I have a little over a half a cycle before it's going to erupt again. Progress over on our main planetoid for cleaning out the Rex and Dartle Ranch is going kind of slow, but I have another way I can make this a little quicker. I may not have a 2x2 space for a regular gas pump, but I do have enough space for a mini gas pump, and it's cold enough in here I don't have to worry about the plastic melting. And I'll just tie it in there like that, and then just add some power. Now I was over here looking because I was checking on our wonderful dartles. You have to remember, our dartles are our only source of meat on this planetoid, and in some sort of physics that I'll never understand, a dartle is only 800 calories worth of meat, whereas the teeny tiny bug known as the Sweetle is 1600 calories. Oh no, we have a scalding. I already know what that is. I say all that to say is, even after all this time that I stopped making the barbecue, we are still only up to 3200 calories with the meat. And each 2600 calories worth of pemmican is going to require 1600 calories worth of meat. So having these divergents online on the other planetoid is also going to help out our space mission on this planetoid, because the dartles are not going to cut it. All right, what happened in here? No, 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 Callie, you don't need to be standing in the liquid. That doesn't seem to be very smart. Uh-oh, you're starting to get hurt. Okay, let's move out of the way. Let's go all the way up here, and then let's build a just-in-case bed. And I'll also start getting all of this wire done first. In fact, I'll put that at a priority 8, so they'll build the triage cots first. It's still pretty cold down here, so the sulfur's not doing too much, at least at this point. So I'm not worried about the gas pump overheating. It's just the fact that Callie was literally standing in front of the erupting geyser. Really, Callie? Again? The good news is we've got a little bit of water here, so I do not need this bottle emptier again. Now when I build this block and destroy this one, our duplicants can get in there, but no more gases can. Oh, you silly, silly Sweetle. Am I gonna have to move you out of the way? Stay out. Let me put a little pneumatic door there. Interestingly enough, we are also under a meteor shower. I hope it doesn't cover up my notes, but it may make you think, well, what about the meteors that are coming down on this planetoid? Can we use those? Well, there was a possibility. Over on Recolon, we have copper and ice, which we could melt the ice into water, but we could also use the slime to feed both mushrooms, or put it into an algae distiller to create algae to feed into an oxygen diffuser. The oxygen diffuser would only require 550 grams per second to produce enough oxygen for 5 dupes. The problem with it is, I've never been able to find any reliable math, and the game doesn't give you any reliable math about how often a meteor comes and how much material it outputs when it does. So I've always been very hesitant about supplying critical programs such as food or oxygen on just the supplies coming from the meteors. As an example, all this crushed ice and snow that's coming down, none of it really exceeds 20 kilos. So if you melt all that, yeah, you'd probably have enough water to last 5 or 6 cycles. But if you're only getting an icy meteor every 30 cycles or every 50 cycles, well, you're up a creek. Okay, we've been vacuuming this place out for a little while, and despite the fact that the debris is all covered with either water or liquid sulfur, something keeps off-gassing. I'm assuming it's happening during the exchange between water and sulfur. It lets more polluted oxygen off-gas from either the polluted mud, maybe there's some polluted dirt in there. So once again, we have our storage place. We need to fill it with a little bit of water as well. I'm just going to go over to our primary planetoid, grab our existing one, hit copy, and then we'll paste it here. I'm also going to put some water on this, enable auto bottle, and I'll put one entire bucket in there for 200 kilos, so I can put sweep only on this. I've realized over on organic, I don't have mud on the other planetoid, so some of this stuff has never been selected, so I'm going to put mud and polluted mud. That should be good, and now we have to sweep all this. Please and thank you. Man, this is going to take 2 dupes a long time. Well, let's head back over to our home planetoid for a little bit, where we are up to a massive 6,400 worth of meat. It bothers me more than it should that these dartles have less meat than these Sweetles. Please somebody explain that to me. Now, as many of you are aware, we have plenty of biodiesel. We use it to make blast shots. So coming off of this line here is not going to be too big of a deal. You can see we already have 5 tons stored up in a buffer tank here, and well over 30,000 seacomb leaves that we can make more phyto oil with to make more biodiesel. So that's not an issue, especially when you consider that the pemmican only requires 1 kilo worth of tallow per 2,600 calories. I have removed the spice grinder because we will not be using it, and have started putting in the microbe musher. Now fear not, I know the microbe musher is a pretty ugly and considered a low quality food system, so we've upgraded it and are using the faint purple microbe musher, so obviously the pemmican's going to be more fancy. We'll tie it in with some power. Our auto sweeper can already reach into this deep freezer where we're storing our massive amount of meat. 7,200 calories now. But we do need to bring the tallow over. Question is, where are we going to start producing it? Now, once we make the tallow by freezing the biodiesel, we don't have to worry about it transitioning back into biodiesel until it hits 80 degrees. So that's one consideration we don't have to worry about. Now, this naphtha here is sitting at a juicy minus 23 degrees. And if I drop just a little bit of biodiesel in there, I'd be willing to bet that it'll turn into tallow, which we can then ship it out. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of room in here. I do have more room over here, although there's some plumbing in the way. I'm going to have to get the biodiesel up here. But what might be a better area for it is, well, the ranch itself where we're creating the biodiesel. Now down here, it's not minus 10, but up here it is. Speaking of which, quick update, the oxygen situation here is almost resolved. All right, we do have a cooling loop of liquid naphtha coming through here. And I have some excess room here. What are you doing, conveyor chute? I'll bet you if I move this down, deconstruct these two, I can move this conveyor chute down since it doesn't really matter where it drops, considering gravity is going to take it to the bottom anyways, just like the chlorine. And then it'll free up all of this space for fun activities. Oh, and of course I broke the cooling loop. Please, let's put deconstruct only on buildings. There's the little bit of naphtha. Wow, that cooling loop really could use a little fill up. So now everything that was being dropped down here is still being dropped down here, which to tell you the truth, I don't remember what was being dropped down here to begin with. And now that I'm looking at it, it's largely unnecessary. We have a lot of megafrons sitting here that should be off into the kitchen. And they get there because this conveyor loader is being loaded by this auto sweeper. So I think this was just an holdover from a long time ago. So all of this can go away. Now all the Rex eggs are going to be dropped right here with the incubator loaded first. And then all the Rex eggs, the tough meat, and the megafron will be sent off to the kitchen through here, which then I guess explains why there's so many Rexes down here and so many megafrons. But more importantly, for the issue at hand, I put a nickel metal tile here, and I've started looping the biodiesel back. I'm looping it because, well, I've been having issues with keeping this area nice and cool. You can see there's a lot of heat being generated from the polymer press, even with the 4 wheeze boards. So we're looping the biodiesel through, it heads into a buffer tank, and then out of the buffer tank into the blast shot maker whenever we need it. And then we're bypassing the excess all the way down and then over, and we're going to drop it a little bit at a time on this tile. You might ask, well, why didn't I just peel it off right here? By doing it this way, I'll always have a little bit of biodiesel moving through these pipes, creating the tallow, so all the nice and cold biodiesel will continue to rotate around the area. But before I start creating the tallow, I want the tallow delivery system to be into place, because otherwise we're going to end up creating entirely too much. Ooh, and I realized if I move the metal tile over by 1, this auto sweeper is going to be able to grab it instead of adding additional auto sweepers. And now I'll be able to have this conveyor loader just say tallow. And now any tallow that we drop off here will be picked up by this conveyor loader and sent off to the kitchen. But that is not all, because then I need it sent to this deep freezer. So this conveyor loader has to say tallow. And then once we get here, I have to move it out, because I'm going to need some automation that says, okay, you can stop spending biodiesel. 400 tons of tallow is quite enough. So we will once again be using our smart storage bin with a NOT gate, with what's going to end up being a very long automation run. We will dodge the deep freezers. I can jump over that with an automation bridge, down the ladders, through some more tiles, and then right here. And what it's going to be shutting is the liquid vent that we're dropping that biodiesel off in. Hopefully this works. And just to make sure that we're not outputting too much tallow at once, i.e. I don't want 10 kilo blobs worth of tallow, because then the viscosity might send it down through here or down over this lip. So I'm going to use an old school liquid valve and reduce it down to 1 kilo blobs at a time. Hop, skip, and a jump with a bridge there. And I did realize this is going to need to be insulated here all the way over because it's too cold and I don't want it to break the pipes. Oh no, why are we scalding again, Callie? Where did all this water come from? Oh no! My awesome liquid lock broke! Which means this thing's just gonna keep pumping. And we're still trying to sweep things out of here. What is left? Anything that's off? Yeah, there's polluted water in here. Where did polluted water come from? Let's get that mopped. And this water. And all this water. Now I can take one of these bottles. Which one has the most? We'll take this one, 249 grams, and I'll empty it right here. I tell you what, I know exactly what happened. Because this is only 30 degrees. That water didn't flash. This polluted dirt sat in that little bit of water and then off-gassed, erasing the water. So let me get that relocated right now. Of all the luck, of all the pieces of debris to fall there, there we go. Our liquid lock is back in place. Callie's going to swim in the 167 degree sulfur, no big deal, but we're almost done. And do not fear, we have medical assistance available on this planetoid. Because as all of you know, say it with me now, safety is our #1 priority. Oh dear goodness, where did this water come from? It did it again. The polluted dirt that Callie is carrying off-gassed. Let's move this one down here now. I mean, eventually there'll be no more polluted dirt in here, right? All right, that's better. We got plenty of liquid sulfur here and we're almost vacuumed out. There's no more polluted dirt in here, so there's no chance of some 700-gram polluted dirt off-gassing and breaking my liquid lock again. Back over here, we're almost done. Notice the liquid vent is already shut. I am going to connect it. Unfortunately, I put this on 100 kilos, but there's already 430 kilos of tallow, thanks to how long we've had the spigot seals in here. So what I'm going to do temporarily is just increase it to, say, 1,000. So now that automation wire is sending out a green signal, I need to bridge there. And we have a mess. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The biodiesel, despite landing on a metal tile that is pretty cold, takes a little while to turn. So I'm going to add this metal tile here. I'm going to sweep all that biodiesel up. And there we go. That's a little bit better. And now as the tallow is converting, it's being sent on to the kitchen, heads to the food sorting area, gets sent to the deep freezer, and then load into the smart storage bin, where I can say I only want 100 kilos. And with us up to 12,000 calories worth of meat, I can now say Pemmican forever. Auto Sweeper is going to do its job, load up the meat and the tallow. Thank you, Andy. And I know a lot of you are thinking this must be disgusting for our space dupes to be eating, but I promise it is perfectly edible and maybe probably quite tasty. And there we have our first batch of pemmican. More good news is over on Recall, and we have a perfect vacuum. Now I just got to chill this and send it out. So now it's time for our Aquatuner. I suppose I could even make this a little bit smaller, and the only person that's going to mind is going to be Callie, and that way I can make my Aquatuner room a little bit smaller. This will be great. Oh, apparently Mustang Cody's gonna mind too. Oh, that's not great. Can somebody pick Cody up? Thank you. But hey, we made it smaller, didn't we? I really hope that sulfur doesn't get to be too much higher. Oh, look at that. Never mind. Our geyser's gone dormant, just as I said it would. Anybody know what Callie's up to? I can't figure it out. This is definitely set on sweep only, but Callie's having some issues. Let's try moving Callie. Nope, that didn't work. There's nothing on relocate. Okay, it's time for a restart. All right, did this help? Callie? Yep, cough it out. Okay, Callie's fixed. Oh, it looks like they're both going to rest. Don't worry, they'll be fine. I've started putting in the fuel system for the rocket. It's not anything fancy. Once again, I don't plan on using this system for very long. The long and short of it is, we take steam, we pump it into the steam engines. I do have it wrapped to where it'll fill this one first. If this one's full, it'll fill this one, and any excess will end up being vented. The reason why we have to vent it is because I'm going to have this controlled by automation. I'm going to turn the switch on to start fueling the rockets, and I'm going to turn the switch off to stop. But once we do that, I don't want steam sitting in the pipes, because then there's a chance that it'll end up cooling down over time, condensing into water, and then breaking the pipes. Sort of the same fear that we have to worry about with the water in these lines. It's just that the steam is so less dense, with only being 1 kilo worth of mass versus 10 kilos worth of water in the pipes. In other words, it's much easier for the steam to condense than it is for the water to boil, which is going to be one of the problems I'm having here. I came to check on our tallow delivery system, and you'll notice that the biodiesel in this insulated liquid pipe behind the vent is losing temperature, and it's probably because I'm using granite. I don't know why I'm using granite. I don't like making pipes out of granite, but it seems to happen all the time. Let's change over to igneous rock, and now the biodiesel seems to have stopped getting colder. Now, like I said, giving it a long enough time, doesn't matter what it's made out of. Insulated doesn't mean it doesn't transfer temps at all. It just means it does so very, very slowly. Well, almost always. There is a resource in the game, ironically called insulation, that doesn't transfer anything at all. Oh no, why have plants died? Oh, because they got drenched, because I'm making room for our ranches. At least they're up and about now. Way to go, dupes! The pod has seen it fit to print out some spicy tofu. And I figured, they just lost all their bog buckets, and they had a tough go with it, with the triage cots and all, so we'll let them enjoy some spicy tofu. See? I'm a giver. I have a feeling that when this video hits the editing floor, it's already going to be between 20 and 30 minutes, so I'm going to put a quick break into this, but rest assured, I'm going to keep recording, so you should see the second video in this episode coming out later this week. So I'm sorry for the to be continued, but hey, at least there was plenty of chaos. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say in the comments below, and until next time, much love, happy gaming, I'll talk to you soon.